Gonna start our recording. Recording in progress. I don't know if you heard that. We are recording. Thank you so much for being here. I'm Maria Bernier from the Connecticut State Library. We are here to talk about the State Annual Report and changes in fiscal year 2021 to some of the questions. Thank you all for being here. This is the first of several duplicate sessions. So if you need to drop out, you can always catch the recording, or I will, you can just jump back in on another session at some other point. But again, if you wouldn't mind just renaming yourself in the participant list so I can tell who's here and who's asking questions, please find the chat box. That's how I'll get your questions today and answer them as we go along. You're always welcome to call me and email me. That's my email address right there on the first slide, so you can track me down. Right now, we're working both from home and in the office, so email is always a good way to catch me. With the phone, it might take me an hour or two to get back to you, so it's not as quick. But we're here to talk about the annual report, and this is really some kind of preliminary information. You're going to see that the report form itself is not available online yet. It usually gets launched in mid-July. So this is really a preparatory session for you guys, so you're aware of what's going to be coming down the pike in July, and you've got a little time to get prepared if you want to do so. But let's see. I always like to start these information sessions just with a clarification about the state annual report that you send to me compared to your own reports that you provide to your funders and your stakeholders. So the state report that I collect is sent to IMLS. I take all of this Connecticut data, smush it all together, and send it to IMLS in a great big spreadsheet, and they put it into the National Public Library Survey. So that national survey, of course, has consistent questions from library to library, state to state, and that's where most of our questions come from, is from the National Public Library Survey. And it can take a long time to change those questions just because of the process, because so many states have to agree that questions need to be changed or need to be added. And so it can be a little slow to respond unless there's a pandemic, which we noticed. So a lot of questions came on last year in a short period of time. But normally it takes a long time to change these national questions. And so, we get a little lead time too, which is helpful. But in addition, each state can add their own questions to our local reports. And Connecticut has absolutely done that. And you'll be able to see now which are Connecticut questions and which are federal US IMLS questions. There's now a column in the spreadsheet, so you can tell whose is whose. But this is all completely different from what you are providing to your stakeholders. Not completely different, maybe some of the same numbers, but probably different formatting, probably a different focus. Your reports are probably a lot more concise and targeted for a specific purpose versus the state annual report, which is really a holistic view of your library that we're comparing with other libraries in the state and other libraries around the country. But your reports are really helping you kind of shine a light on what you're doing at your library. They are under your control. You can count whatever you want in your own reports, and I encourage you to do that and to go a little deeper in your own reports in some ways, and particularly for instance, with regard to reference transactions, because you may be aware that in the state annual report, there's only one question about reference transactions. Like you only get to report it in one place. And I know that so much of the work that libraries are doing is related to reference work, whether it's reader's advisory, one-on-one tech help. That is such a robust portion of library services. So that's really something that you can detail in much greater length in your own statistics that you keep for your own library and in your own reports. So in that case, I encourage you to really ramp up your own data tracking and get the information you need to be able to tell your stakeholders what you're doing to show the impact of your library's work in the community. So that's kind of the difference between the big state annual report that we send off to the national guys and your local reports. So sometimes I will draw that distinction with you when you ask me questions by email or when you phone. I'm going to remind you that you guys can count whatever you want for your own purposes, and this annual report is really for a larger picture survey. Okay. So we'll head right into the questions. There are obviously going to be COVID questions again. So a lot of the questions that IMLS gave us last year will be repeated this year. Then they were pretty straightforward yes, no questions for the most part. It was sort of yes, no, was your library closed at any point because of COVID? You know, did you continue to offer reference services during COVID? Yes, no. Did you offer any kind of curbside or external service? Yes, no. So most of them will be pretty simple. They're probably going to be the same as what you answered last year because your services are probably continuing in the same way. There are two questions you'll remember that do require you to do some kind of counting, some kind of math. So I hope you have some kind of records. The first is about the number of weeks your library was closed due to the pandemic. And IMLS often uses the distinction of, were you open for more than half of your scheduled hours, or were you closed for more than half of your scheduled hours? So you'll want to count carefully about the number of weeks your library was closed. And this is closed to the public. So your staff may have been in the building working, but you are still close to the public. So that's really what they're asking about. Let's see, that the public cannot access the building regarding of staff access. And your building could be physically closed, but you could still be offering virtual or curbside services. So those things can coexist. If you answered phones, so it's closure is specifically about the building. Could people enter your doors? And that's kind of the physical threshold that IMLS has put on these close and open questions. And then likewise, the number of weeks your library had limited public occupancy. And limited public occupancy can include limits on the number of public inside the building. It could also include appointment-only services, visitor time limits, closed stacks, closed meeting rooms. All of those count toward limited public occupancy. So I'm going to gamble and say that all Connecticut public libraries had limited public occupancy at some point over the past year. You just need to figure out how many weeks that was. And just as a reminder, all of these definitions are in the annual report form, so you'll be able to find them in the form itself. If you're trying to remember what did Maria say about limited public occupancy, you can find it in the Excel form, so you don't have to take all these notes. While I'm mentioning notes, all of these slides are already on the LibGuide, so they're available to you at any point to review. Likewise, the recording will be on my LibGuide, and I'm going to send you at 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock this afternoon an email that has a link to that website as well as an evaluation survey link. So you'll get that website and you can find these slides and eventually the recording up there as well. All right, so let's see, more COVID questions from Connecticut. So these are our local ones. And you'll remember from last year, we asked if you offered curbside service, give me some start and end dates. Probably you had some kind of service going as of the beginning of this reporting year, which is July 1st. You probably were offering some kind of curbside service as of July 1st, 2020. And maybe you want to say we started in April of 2020 and it ended such and such, or it's continuing. And I think in most cases, a lot of libraries are continuing this service. So this is an open-ended question. You can type in there whatever data makes sense in your context. So if that's a beginning date and a firm end date, rock on. If that's maybe a beginning date and an ongoing or a still going or an existing, that's great too. Just whatever you've got, you can put into that form in that field. Also, there's going to be a little drop-down question. If your library did offer curbside pickup, was it for residents only or for both residents and non-residents? And there's also an NA option in case you didn't offer curbside service. So those are questions we'd love to get your feedback on. And then there are two kind of optional ones, depending on how you have been tracking your outdoor service, your curbside pickup, your lobby pickup, whatever you want to call it, that sort of external service. You may have been counting the transactions. You may have been counting the number of patrons who used the service. If you've got that data, go ahead and send it to me. We'll just put it in those boxes, and then I can report it back to you on some of the fact sheets and things like that, which has been fun. So if you've got that data, send it to me. If you don't worry, okay? Like, don't try and backtrack and get the number of transactions and the number of patrons for the past year, because you're going to tear your hair out, okay? Send me whatever you have. Those two last questions are really optional for our use in Connecticut. All right. Then we're going to head on to some clarifications about questions. A lot of these clarifications, again, linger from last year because they're still relevant. So with these annual public service hours, it's about when the building is open to the public, right? So remember I said how IMLS is holding firm about this sort of physical foundational definition of the building, the doors, the physical envelope of the structure being open to the public. So if your foyer is open and patrons are walking into your foyer, that means your building is open. If they're not, if you are keeping your patrons outside your building, don't come in for the bathroom, don't come in for any kind of pickup, then your building would be physically closed to the public. So those are the distinctions. Really think about the exterior walls of your building and whether people are coming into the building when you're counting those hours. Also, make sure that you are just counting, again, open to the public. So obviously you and your staff are there working. You've been working this whole time. People have been working like crazy, amazing hours, doing amazing things, which is fabulous. But we want to try and get apples to apples. And we're really asking about when the building is open to the public for public service hours. And if your hours changed a few times to the year, hopefully you've been keeping track of that. And you do need to add up all those hours. So it may have been 30 hours a week for a couple months. Maybe you ramped up to 35 hours a week for a couple months. You're going to have to roll out the math or use a calculator or find somebody on staff who can do that for you. But it really is the number of hours over the course of the year that you were open to the public for public services. This one about number of weeks open. Again, weeks that your building was open to the public for at least 2 days, as we're going to say in Connecticut. Okay, I've got a question. If the grab and go service is in the vestibule and required patrons to come into the first set of double doors, yes, that means your library was open. So if a member of the public is walking through an exterior door to get access to your building, they are in your building. The foyer is part of your building. The lobby is part of your building. That means your building is open to the public. Okay, so staff has been there all this time, probably rock on. But if there's a member of the public opening a door, turning a handle, waving a hand to make the automatic door counter open, and they're walking through a door, they're crossing a threshold, they are in your building and your building is open to the public. That's how IMLS interprets that. Okay, and library visits, the door count. This is interesting, another clarification. that you're counting the people who come into the building for any purpose. So if there's somebody delivering water bottles, you can count that person. If you've had people in doing construction or cleaning, you can count those people as well. So as a clarification from IMLS, it's anybody who entered the building for any purpose. Obviously, this is not going to include your curbside service or your drive-through window service, because those people are not entering your building, right? Remember, it's the threshold, it's the actual door, right? It's that sort of line in the concrete that we are thinking about with this door count, library visits, with the open and closed. So if people are staying outside your building in their cars, maybe they're hopping out of the car to grab a bag off a table that's on the sidewalk, that's curbside service. That does not count as library visits. But if you're counting those people as part of your curbside transactions, you can count them there. So these are all complementary numbers we can put together. Question in the chat, your curbside pickup is located in your lobby beyond the door. Is that a conflict? Oh, I don't have a conflict with that. I ain't got a problem. That means your building is open to the public. So you would be able to count those people as library visits because they are crossing the threshold, right? They're opening a door, they're coming in your building. So they are visiting your library for any purpose. You can count them as library visits. That counts. Okay, ILLs, again, a clarification, a reminder, do include consortium holds if your library is part of a network. Those get counted in ILLs for the purposes of the state annual report. Likewise, you'll include patron-placed holds if you do that. Those count as ILLs for the purpose of the state annual report. As a reminder, you're not going to include any kind of borrow loans, swaps that you might get from CLC or their media circuits, or our service center loans. Those don't count as interlibrary loans for your purposes. So just double check the definitions that are going to be in the annual report as a reminder for what you count in there. And as I mentioned, reference transactions, this got a little bit of a tweak in terms of definition from IMLS. It's always these information consultations, it's about library staff, blah, 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 blah. It's what we think of as reference service. But there's a reminder from IMLS that it doesn't include any kind of formal instruction. So in this case, this would be like in a school or academic setting where you're offering bibliographic instruction or computer classes. Those don't count as reference transactions. That might count as a program instead, but it's not a reference transaction. Likewise, anything that's an assistance with a location, like where's the bathroom, not a reference transaction, okay? Schedules like who's working until 8 o'clock today, that's not a reference transaction, nor is can you help me with a copier, or do you have a stapler I can borrow, or what's your policy regarding taking photographs in the library. Those are not reference transactions according to the IMLS definition, which is a little more consistent now with the Reference and User Association division of ALA. They tried to get that a little more consistent. So a little more info about reference. You should be counting readers advisory. Hopefully you've been doing that because that's such a meaty, wonderful reference transaction. And likewise, your one-on-one tech help is reference. Another great one that's been really booming. This is why I hope you are keeping more detailed numbers for yourselves than you're sending to me, because that one-on-one tech help number has to be skyrocketing at every single library, right? Especially over the past year as you've been doing these transactions, maybe on Zoom or over the phone, trying to help people one-on-one with their tech help. We've all been needing it. So that's a big one. And here's the reminder in this bullet point, that final bullet point of what not to include, and some examples of what not to include as reference transactions. So there's more detail about that if you want it in the annual report form itself, and I can always send you a lot more detail. Okay, so this year we actually did in Connecticut add a few new questions, and I'm hoping these will be fairly easy and low impact for you so that we're not creating a substantial workload for you guys, I added a question for the library website, because we ask you everything else in terms of contact info, your fax number that nobody uses anymore. But I really want to know your library website, because that helps me when I'm trying to track libraries down. But it also helps us create a directory and update that directory on our website as well, so that people can find you more easily and just track you down, find your website. So that's just your homepage URL, whatever you refer people to. And then the second question I stole from some other states. There's one of me, there's a state data coordinator in every state and most of the US territories. And we talk to each other and steal from each other the way librarians do. And they had this great question about something your library did that you're proud of. And particularly in this year when so many libraries were closed to the public, physically closed, but continuing services in a different and robust way, we'd love to hear stories of things you did that you're proud of. And this can be anything, right? Again, it's going to be a huge open-ended question. You can send me anything. And in fact, if you'd like to send me photographs or I don't know, marketing materials, anything else you created that you're proud of, I would love to get that along with your annual report. And it could be an anecdote about a patron interaction. It could be a major tech breakthrough. It could be a substantial physical change, but anything your library did that you're proud of. And this is a great way to get the staff involved and come up with some fabulous things that make you feel better about what your library did. But keep track of those too, because they're, again, good talking points for you as you're working with your stakeholders and your funders. So hang on to those things that you're proud of. Then in addition, I added a couple of questions, easy, yes, no, don't know, kind of questions about whether your library lends computers and hotspots for patrons to take home. Because this is a question that I've gotten over the past year from many members of the public, and I don't have this data to give them. And I would like to be able to give them this data about who may have hotspots for loan, who may have computers and laptops for loan. So please just let me know that, yes or no, if you've got them available for people. All right, also new this year in Connecticut is this concept of self-directed activities as distinct from library programs. And this, again, is something that has boomed over the course of the pandemic. While we couldn't have people together in person or even online in some cases for programs, so many libraries really did the fabulous take and make bags or did other activities where it's really more of a self-directed thing, where the patron takes the items home and maybe works on them at home without any kind of interaction with the library staff. So there's a definition that we created there on the slide for use here in Connecticut. Yeah, and sometimes it's even on-site. You know, it could be maybe that you've got a craft out on a Saturday morning that families can drop by and do whenever they want to. So if it's kind of a drop-in self-directed activity, that's something that could happen on-site in your library. That's not necessarily a take and make. So those are options. I'm sorry, I just saw this question in the chat, something you're proud of. Does that display in the report? It's probably not going to end up in the statistical report just because I'm not sure how to do that in the statistical report now that I think about it, because some of those answers may be absolutely enormous. So that's a good question, Wendy, about how that would get displayed. I suspect it's going to come to me. I'm not going to send it to IMLS. It's really going to be for our storytelling purposes here in Connecticut and for me to be able to give back to you at some point. So that's an intriguing question that I'm going to have to figure out and follow up on how those stories would appear in the statistical report if they do. But always when you're writing, consider writing for the public and a professional audience. So send me something that makes you sound good, if you wouldn't mind. Okay, another question in the chat. You've been changing your story content more story walk content more often. That's a fabulous self-directed activity. Absolutely. Whoops. And I have in the programs, there's more information on the LibGuide, and I've got a whole tab on the LibGuide about programs and activities. And you've probably seen I have an entire other hour talking about changes to programs and activities and a whole spreadsheet for that. So there are examples of what's an activity and what's a program. Story walk is an activity, and make sure, if you're changing your story walk, go ahead and count that as different activities each time. That's a great idea. So this is a little snapshot of the annual report form, so you can see how these questions will look in the form. There's that new question, new column that I added way over on the left. All of these are Connecticut specific questions about self-directed activities. And you got the question number. And then last year and this year, I added this sort of notation about whether it's a new question or an edited or clarified question this year, just to kind of give you guys a heads up that this is something you might want to pay attention to that may be a little bit different from past reports. It just helps to draw your eye to those questions for you to realize, okay, well, I might actually have to think harder about these because they're new. So you can see here the number of activities, those are kind of grouped together by age. And there are a couple different age brackets now. So those are all of the number of activities grouped together, and then the total will calculate automatically with a formula in the form. And then you'll give me the number of participants in each activity. And then there's a total that will calculate as well. I strongly recommend, if you haven't already signed up for one, that you attend one of my webinars on programs and activities, because we're going to talk all about this. Or like send one of your coworkers or send somebody who deals with programs, because we'll really delve into what these things are and what the age groups are. So we'll look into that. But this is just a little snapshot of how it will be on the annual report. All right, let's talk about new IMLS questions. Let's do the easy ones first. There are a couple of new IMLS, so national questions about how you counted things. So we have always been counting the number of sessions on public internet computers. You send me these amazing numbers, like thousands of sessions on your public computers. And now IMLS wants to know if that's actually an annual count, where you're like counting every day and adding them up per month and then per year, or whether it's an estimate based on a typical week or weeks. So however you do it, you can pick whether you've actually counted or whether it's an estimate. Likewise, for the libraries that are reporting the number of wireless sessions in the annual report, is it an actual count that you've gotten from some management software, or is it an estimate based on a typical week of hardware logging or network scanning? And IMLS put those terms in there, hardware logging and network scanning, specifically because they want to encourage you to have some kind of methodology behind the count, not that you're walking around the library and counting everybody who looks like they're looking at a phone or a laptop that doesn't belong to the library, who might be using your Wi-Fi, right? They want you to be a little bit more database than that. So that's what they're asking for in terms of hardware logging or network scanning. Frankly, I don't know what that means. I as a non-IT person, I'm not sure how you would calculate network scanning. I encourage you to talk to your IT people if you have them and find out what that is, or invest in some Wi-Fi management software so that you can get actual counts on a regular basis. That would be huge, particularly as libraries are offering more Wi-Fi and expanding Wi-Fi signals outside the building. I think you really need to be understanding who's using your Wi-Fi, how often it's being accessed, what the usage patterns are, and that comes from management software. So I hope that libraries are heading in that direction to get more detailed management of the Wi-Fi network. All right, programs. There are substantial changes in terms of programs from IMLS in terms of our national questions. So again, these are getting rolled out to every library in every state, and we're going to start bubbling this information up on a national basis. I realize that a lot of these questions as we go along are going to be new, and just give me your best data as we go, okay? Just a reassurance. We got a couple years to actually let this settle in and let it make sense before it's actually going to click, and then IMLS will be able to use those numbers on a more consistent and reliable basis. But a program is distinct from a self-directed activity. And from the IMLS point of view, a program is a planned event. So it's usually scheduled. Staff have put some serious effort into getting that on the calendar and making sure it happens. There could be registrations, but it's about groups that are coming to attend, to learn, to partake about library services or information. But it's really about, it's a specific planned thing as opposed to a self-directed activity. And there are some exclusions here in the third bullet point, things that may be more of a reference transaction, or maybe more of a program, or maybe more of a service offering. So you'll exclude those from your programs. And as always, you're going to count all your programs that you sponsor or that you co-sponsor. And I think we're going to see co-sponsoring happening a lot more, particularly in the virtual realm, as libraries are sharing resources to hire people who may be more expensive, right? So you're cutting your costs and each contributing to the price of someone coming in, because you can all include your patrons online. There's no capacity limits online. So we're probably going to see a lot more co-sponsorships of programs. Go ahead and count those. As always, you will not include programs that are sponsored by other groups who are just borrowing your meeting room. You probably have not encountered much of that over the past year, unless you've opened up your meeting room recently. But in this case, it would be, say, the Girl Scouts who use the meeting room for a recruitment event. Lovely, fabulous. You can count that in another question, but that does not count as a library program. Likewise, a reminder, you can count your programs in a series, right? So some libraries are having maybe 8 weeks of story time, and people sign up for the full 8 weeks. That counts as 8 programs. So that's all as it has been. So some of the changes here are about really pulling apart programs and seeing the dynamic offerings that libraries have been bringing in the past year and will continue to bring. So we always asked about programs, right? We just asked programs. Last year, we started to ask about in-person programs and virtual programs. And now we're pulling those apart, and we're asking about in-person programs that either happen on-site or off-site. And we're asking about virtual programs that either happen live synchronously or have been recorded and are asynchronous. So let's backtrack and talk about in-person on-site. And when we say on-site, that means on the library premises, on the library grounds, on the library property, right? So whether you are in the building, in the parking lot, on the lawn, on the roof, in the basement, if you are on the library's property, you are on site, okay? So think of on site as kind of the bubble around your library. Now, off-site is everywhere that is not on your library property, right? So this could be the beach, it could be the senior center, the community center, the firehouse, the schools that you're going to, anywhere that is not library property will be off-site. And those are in-person programs. And in-person means not this, right? Like in-person means we're all in the same room together. We are face to face, we're sharing space together, maybe we're sitting under the same tree together, but we are live and in person together. So let's contrast that with anything that's virtual. And so IMLS has created this question, live virtual programs. And this is a lot of what libraries have been doing, say with Zoom programs, or maybe a Facebook program where it's happening synchronously. I have to tune in now or I'm going to miss it, right? And we may be familiar with this from any kind of online coursework that we've done if you've taken courses synchronously or asynchronously. Do you have to tune in and get the instructor at that time every single week? Or is it asynchronous when it's just on demand and you can pop in whenever you want? So those are the two distinctions. And pre-recorded programs, on-demand programs, are what libraries may be doing, say, with story times, where the librarian is recording them ahead of time and posting them online for people to view. And it can be on demand. It could be 3 in the morning. It could be anytime. Those are the pre-recorded asynchronous programs. So we're really breaking apart those virtual programs into two places. And now the trick is you can only pick one, right? So you can count a program only once in our annual report. And as I mentioned, the programs and activities spreadsheet tool that I'm going to talk about for another hour in a different webinar that's online, that tool will help guide you through these decisions. So that's, I recommend people come to that as well. Okay, with audience age, this is fairly similar to what it was, except that IMLS subdivided children. So it used to be that kids were 0 to 11. It's a lot of kids. That covers a lot of territory. And they broke it down now into ages 0 to 5, which is really more of a pre-literacy kind of focus. And then ages 6 to 11, a little bit more older children's age. Then we've got the teen and YA, which they clarified as ages 12 to 18. Adults are anyone 19 and up. And then there's IMLS calls it general interest, but which is really intergenerational and family programs. Maybe it's an all ages movie. So you're going to pick one of those ages as the primary intended audience age. So as we've always done with story times, right? So that's going to be a children 0 to 5 program. And everybody who comes, whether they're 2 years old or 35 years old and a caregiver, they're all going to get counted in attendance for that particular children's program. And again, the spreadsheet tool will help you that. But that's really how we're thinking about it. Audience is who shows up at that program for that particular audience. What else do I want to say? Adult programs, I was trying to think of ideas for what an adult program would be specifically for that age group. And I was trying to think of examples like long-term health insurance or planning for retirement, or some of those things where you're not going to get kids in YA. And that's really an adult program versus something like a family or an intergenerational program that may be, a trivia event where everybody's coming, or could be chess club. Everybody's coming to chess club, all ages. So that's how you can sort of think about the age of the intended audience as you break these down. So now we're going to count both the programs and the attendance at those programs as we've been doing. So with your in-person programs, you count them the way you normally do, right? You're counting heads or pairs of eyes or butts in the seats, however you count them, you're going to count them. With your live virtual programs, so remember, those are the programs where we all have to be there at a specific time or we're going to miss it, right? Those synchronous live programs. Count them how you can, whether it's the number of unique viewers, or if you can get people to chime in and tell you how many people are watching on there, and try and get some kind of head count or face count or something for your live virtual programs. There is a new tool that I'm going to give you a link for on the next couple of slides for different platforms. So you can go to, say, this new spreadsheet tool and say, all right, we did a Zoom program. How do I count the number of live attendance? And this will kind of guide you through for that particular platform, and also in terms of views. So hang on a minute before we get to that slide, and I'll show you the link for that. But if you are doing pre-recorded programs, right, where you are recording it ahead of time, posting it for people to view whenever they want, you're not going to report attendance, right, because they didn't actually attend. They watched it, they viewed it, and that's a separate question for the number of views. So views of recorded programs. This is any program that your library produced for watching on demand at any point between July 1 and June 30, right? We're talking about the annual report, which is that reporting period. So with the number of views, you want to figure out how many times people watched it, right? So how many times they clicked play. It's not the number of people who saw your Facebook post about the video. It's actually the number of people who watched the video. And again, the way you get this information is different on every single social media platform, but there's a tool for that. Now, I want to draw your attention, this part here in red and bold here. This is a change from what we were doing last year in terms of how long you count those views. So last year for the annual report, I said, just give me everything you've got for the whole year. So IMLS has come back and said, that's hard to do. We think you need to count the number of views after 7 days. So if you've got a video that you posted on a Monday, you're going to go back the next Monday, count the number of times it was watched over the course of that week, that 7-day period, and that's what you're going to enter as the number of views for that particular recorded program. So you're not going to wait till the end of the month. You're not going to wait till the end of the year. You're going to try and capture that information a little bit more quickly, because most of the views do happen early on, right? Most of your patrons are watching it in the first few days. And be sure that if you have posted your video in multiple places, that you're counting the views in those multiple places. Oopsie. So here's the magic link. This is on my LibGuide in a couple places. This is also in the program spreadsheet. This is also here in the slides. So you can grab these slides off the website and click that link at any point. But it's a fabulous Google Sheet that my fellow state data coordinators pulled together using numerous smart brains for how to find us on various platforms. But it's kind of subdivided up: video conferencing, social media. So whether you are using Zoom or WebEx or Facebook or YouTube or Discord, I think is in there. There's a couple other potential video watching platforms. There's information in there both for how you can find the number of people who watched it when it was live and the number of people who watched the recording. So that's a valuable tool, and I thank my fellow data coordinators for that. It's very handy. So again, you're going to count those after 7 days, not at, oh, what did I put here? The number of views as of the end of the month. Oh man, there was another line here that I got to check. There was another line right here that got deleted. So this second bullet point is supposed to say count the number of views as of 7 days, not the number of views as of the end of the month. However, if that's what you've got, go ahead and send it to me, okay? Right? Like, please do not backtrack and try to start counting these things for programs you offered 9 months ago, okay? Right? Don't do that, right? Do not drive yourself crazy. Send me the number of views you have this year. We'll figure it out. And then going forward from today, from July 1st, you're going to start counting the number of views as of 7 days. So please do not get stressed about this particular metric. I will take whatever data you send me for this metric going forward in this accounting year. So please don't get too worried about this. All right, sorry, I'm going to backtrack and read a couple questions in the chat. Do you count Pre-recorded how-to videos for your grab and go kits as asynchronous programs? Totally, yes. Yes. So that gives you a double count, right? So first of all, you created grab and go kits. So that's one self-directed activity for 50 participants, perhaps. And you get to count that as a pre-recorded asynchronous program. And then you'll get to count the number of views of that recording. So yes, that's a couple of things you get to count there. Bravo. Okay, and the next question, for pre-recorded programs that remain up for several months. Oh yeah, sorry, Chris. Yeah, you do not have to backtrack. Please, please, please don't count the new views. No, like keep your life easy, okay? Like honestly, send me what you got for the past, and starting today, we're going to start doing it differently with just a number of 7 days. So 7 days is good. Yeah, and I know 7 days is limiting, Sarah. Yep, and that's what IMLS picked. It's kind of a darned if you do, darned if you don't, right? Like if you pick 30 days, or if you pick something else, they had to settle on somewhere. And I think they found that in some of the video software and video platforms, there was already a 7-day metric. So that was something that existed already in the counting mechanisms that was easier to grab. So that's why they went with 7 days. And we're going to try and stick with 7 days in Connecticut so that we can be consistent eventually with everybody else across the country. So 7 days is really what we're aiming for going forward. If we want to debate that, we can do that in the next webinar, which is tomorrow. So come back. This is a little screenshot of what the questions will look like in the annual report. These are programs specifically for the teen age group, and they're grouped by age like this so that, you know, the YA librarian can fill in these questions, the children's librarian can fill in the other questions, the adult services librarian can fill in the grown-up questions, but you see how they're grouped by age. And this column here, this again is that new column, so you can see where the source of this question is, if it's a sort of a national question or something that feeds into a national question. And here's that thing where this particular question was edited this year, because last year it was really the number of in-person programs. Now it's the number of in-person on-site programs. And the new question is really about off-site programs. Likewise, last year we had a question about number of virtual programs, and now we're breaking out between the live virtual programs and the pre-recorded on-demand programs, which come down here. So IMLS calls them synchronous programs. So I'm going to have an automated total here for you. You just fill in stuff and it'll automatically add up for you. And then we've got all the attendance questions here, and the views question comes in. So again, they're grouped by ages, and you'll report attendance and views of those programs. Oops. Okay. Oh yeah, there's the tool. I'm having webinars, lots of webinars, lots of info about how to count programs and activities. It could go on for a long time. So more changes. Here's the slide that I have been kind of talking about, adding in that column so you can see where the question comes from. And so if it's got a US in front of it, I'm sorry, but we are stuck with that question, right? There's not a lot I can do to change that question. I have to ask it of you so that I can report it to IMLS and they can put it in the public library survey. That's what US means. Anything with an F is sort of a feeder question. I couldn't come up with a better term, so I used feeder. It feeds into that national question, where it may become part of a total, or it may be a little snippet that I need to get to the final end of the question. So that's what I call a feeder question. And then the Connecticut specific questions are things that don't feed into that and don't end up with IMLS. They're really just specifically for us here in Connecticut. So those are the new abbreviations you'll see on the report. So here's the website where all of this happens. And this site is super dense and a little overwhelming. And I understand that, but I haven't figured out how else to do it yet. So it's all there. Like I threw everything at you. It's all in one spot. The annual report tab is this one here. And then you'll see there are several additional tabs within the annual report page. When the 2021 report form is available, it'll be here. But there is already a tab for describing these changes that we're talking about right now. There's a tab already for programs that details, again, all of the changes to the programs. That's where the spreadsheet tool is. Lots of definitions and distinctions for what's a program, what's an activity, lots of detail there. And there's still tabs for state aid and previous year's reports if you need them. We might have time to pop over there. I'll take a look. So just as a reminder, the survey form itself will have a lot of information, both in the initial instructions and definitions page and in all of the little pop-up comment boxes. Like there's a million comment boxes, like almost one for every single question that you can sort of hover over to get more detailed information and definitions about that question. So there's a ton of info in there that often will answer the questions that you email me. So I encourage you to take a look at those as you go and as you're working on your report. And I know that it's June 2nd and your annual report isn't going to be due until mid-November, but I would like to start laying the foundation now to encourage you not to wait until the last minute to submit your data or to work on this form, both because it stresses me out, but I think it also stresses you guys out too. So the form is going to be up in mid-July. That will give you 4 months to fill it out. I really encourage you to take a look and get started earlier in that time frame rather than later. So please don't wait till the last minute. Here is where I remind you that the chat box is open. Please feel free to send me questions. There's also an evaluation. I can't grab that. I will grab it in a minute. At 4 o'clock, you're going to get an email from me with a link to the LibGuide, as well as I mentioned, a link to the evaluation form. I would love to hear from you because if I say things that are unclear, I need to know, right? So that I can change it and fix it for the future. Or if there's something you'd like me to add or something that didn't work for you, please let me know, because I have been able to adapt these information sessions as I go along based on feedback from people who have attended. So please do send me the evaluation form. And I want to hop out right now and go over to the LibGuide. Yeah, so this is the annual report page right here. If you're looking for it, and again, our LibGuide is, as I mentioned, dense. It's all here. But if you can get to the top menu here, go for services, pull down to library statistics. That's going to get you to basically anything with a number, whether it's a statistical profile, annual report. The chart and report creators are fabulous. I inherited from Tom Newman. But the annual report here changes. So I'm going to be putting the link for this recording right here. Here are the slides right here, so you can grab these whenever you need them. Here are all of the new questions listed, new Connecticut questions, these clarifications that we talked about to the current questions, all of the COVID-19 related questions from IMLS if you want to read them. There they are. And here's the other Connecticut COVID questions. So lots of info about what the actual changes are. Here's one link to this guide, which is golden. It starts here. So this is, as I mentioned, the platform specific guidance for counting attendance and views and everything. It's really fabulous. Lots of good stuff here. So video conferencing, you can see if you're doing it on Google Meet, here's how you'd count your live people. And then as we scroll over, here's how you would count, oh, you can't in Google Drive, how you would count your asynchronous people. Works better with other platforms. So great tool. And that was one link to it. As we pop up here and go to the programs tab, so right here, programs, Here again is detailed information about all of the program questions. Here's this Excel tool that I'm going to talk about in depth in another session. You can register. And here's again a reminder of how you pick all these different types of programs and ages, attendance, what that means. These examples are really helpful. What is a program? What's a self-directed activity? FAQs can be helpful as you go along. Most of the FAQs are in the Excel spreadsheet. And then these definitions are right here as well. So if you're trying to figure out what is a program, what is a self-directed activity, those reminders are there. So again, that is under services, library statistics, gets you to this statistics page, and you're going to pick annual report. And then you're going to come down here and pick the changes or the program. So as I mentioned, lots of info, super, super dense. Okay, I think I have answered everything that was in the chat. If I have not answered your question in the chat, please remind me or type it again. Recorded programs, yep, okay. I see something popping up. Yep, I'm gonna save this, okay. Thank you all for coming. I think we covered everything. You have my email addresses. I want to give you the evaluation form link in the chat, just in case you wouldn't mind popping over there. That's the evaluation form. Okay, good. We're done. I think I've read everything. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. Thank you all so much for being here. I really appreciate your time. Thank you. Thank you. Be in touch if you have questions, and we'll see you again.